Senator Ted Kennedy joins us on the Young Turks now. Senator, welcome.
Yeah, good morning.
We've
got some real challenges here in the Congress and the Senate now, and we better get busy with them.
Exactly. Well, the president pretended last night that he's got a new bipartisan group led by Joe Lieberman who's going to help him to deal with those challenges. Is there any Democrats in that group, and what on God's earth would they tell him?
Well, first of all, we have to. This country understands that the overarching issue of last November was an instruction to the Congress, to the Senate, and to the President for a change direction. Now, that's been just about 80 days that the President said he didn't want to be rushed. He wanted to talk to generals. He did that, and, of course, he got rid of generals that didn't agree with him. And we've lost 100 Americans during the time that he has been reviewing and finding out what new direction that he wanted to go in. And now he is going to inject 24,000 Americans into a civil war into Iraq, and that is a major mistake. I believe that the Congress of the United States has a responsibility to the American people to say no. If the President wants to send an additional kind of troops into it, he ought to come back to the Congress for approval, not just say that he has an open-ended authorization to do so. You remember the authorization that was passed in October of 2002 dealt with Saddam Hussein's violation of the United Nations, Saddam Hussein working operationally with Al-Qaeda, Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction. None of that is active anymore, and Saddam Hussein is gone. And does anyone really believe, if you're listening, audience, that today we would pass a resolution that say, well, we will send American troops in the middle of a Shia-Sunni war that's been going on for 1,300 years and not have the kind of decision-making by the Iraqi government that is going to discipline those militias and bring some order out of that chaos.
Senator Kennedy, you introduced legislation, or you're going to, that is going to try to hold this administration accountable. But if there's some chance that they won't listen to you. Tony Snow has said, quote, the president has the ability to exercise his own authority if he thinks Congress has voted the wrong way. What do you do with a president who ignores what Congress says if he thinks that you guys voted the wrong way?
Well, the fact is, in one of his what they call signing statements that he had recently, he said he didn't even need the authorization, any authorization. He could continue this conflict. If you have the House of Representatives and the Senate of the United States denying him the resources, he is the commander-in-chief, but the ability to wage war is described in the Constitution of the United States. And under Article 1, that remains with the Congress, and we have the right to not fund the additional. What we're talking about is the additional manpower. Now, that's been done previously. This isn't anything new. The Congress did this at the time of the escalation of a proposed escalation of forces in Lebanon, and we did it in Vietnam as well. And the president had to listen to it. So Mr. Snow ought to read history and read the Constitution a little more. We have the power. The real question is whether Congress will have the courage to do it.
Well, let's talk about that. Your proposal was to suggest that if he wants more troops or more money for those troops, he's got to come back to you guys. There was some talk when the story broke, Senator, that it might not even get to a vote. How is it developing, and do you see at least getting a vote on your proposal?
Well, the importance of this legislation is the following. If we wait for an appropriations to come up for the additional kind of money, that'll be at the end of January or February. It takes the Senate probably 5 weeks to be able to process it. So we wouldn't really have a vote on the money for maybe 2.5 months. By that time, the administration will have all those troops over there, and then you'll be casting a vote to deny them the body armor and the equipment to protect themselves. And that is not a place where the Congress is prepared to go now. If we act on my proposal now, we do it within the next 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we are able to insist that the president come back to the Congress and get the authorization for the troops and for the funding. That's the way we ought to go.
Senator Kennedy, we're talking to Senator Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts. The president talks about sacrifice, but he never talks about shared sacrifice. You just mentioned the funding for the war there. Is there any plans to say, well, if we're going to have sacrifice, it has to be shared with the rest of the country. You sacrifice your tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, and that's how we'll pay for the additional funding of the troops at a bare minimum.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, the focus and attention ought to be in not getting an escalation and sending the additional troops over there for the time, because it's going to, I think, put them at greater risk. We're going to have greater casualties. It flies in the face of the general's recommendation and of the Baker report. That's number one. On the broader issue, I think there's no real desire for any increase in taxes on the middle class, but I think there's certainly a recognition that those in the very top 1% of the taxpayers ought to be paying more of their fair share. I think that'll come on up, but I don't think we ought to tie that together with the surge. This president is staying the course, but he's escalated the course, and that is completely in conflict with what the American people said last fall, and the Congress shouldn't permit him to do it.
Are you aware, Senator Kennedy, that one of the news anchors at Fox called you a hostile enemy because of your the proposal you've made?
Well, I heard that from my wife, but I understand she apologized this morning.
Oh, she did. Right.
We'll have to. We want to stay focused on what's important around here. That's. I've been called a lot of things over the period of the time. If this issue wasn't just so important, it is in the Iraq War. We ought to be focused on it, give it our full attention, and also take action.
Senator Kennedy, is the Iraq War winnable at this point?
Well, it's my sense is, as Secretary Gates said, the United States is not winning at the present time, but we have interest in that country. We have interest in that region. Is the question: can there be an alteration and change in tactics that can preserve our interests? And also bring some stability to that region? I think the answer to that's yes. If you're saying, can we send in 24,000 more Americans and can we blow our way through Baghdad, I'd say the answer to that is no.
Last question for you, Senator Kennedy. You talked about courage at the beginning of this conversation. Do you think that Democrats in Congress, maybe a few Republicans, do you think Democrats have the courage to truly stand up to the president on this?
Well, I think it's what the American people are expecting. And we're going to give them an opportunity to do that in the United States Senate. And I'm hopeful that we'll have we've gotten a number of good responses from our Democratic colleagues in support of this policy, and we're going to continue to ensure that we get accountability. So people across our country are going to know who believes that this escalation makes sense and who believes that it doesn't.
Senator Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks.